She was still wearing her uniform when she walked into the boardroom. The coffee stain was still there, dried brown and stiff along the collar of her white shirt. Her hair was pulled back with the same rubber band she had used that morning, the morning she had been humiliated in front of 40 people, accused of theft, and thrown out onto the rain-soaked street like she was nothing. Like she had always been nothing. If you enjoy watching my video, hit the subscribe button, like and comment where you're watching from. Thank you. Maya Osei set the stack of legal documents down on the long mahogany table. The sound echoed through the glass and steel room like a gunshot. Every head at the table turned toward her. Lawyers in $1,000 suits. Board members with silver hair and harder eyes. All of them staring at the girl in the dirty waitress uniform standing at the head of their table. She looked at them one by one and did not flinch. "My name is Maya Osei," she said, her voice steady though her hands were not. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the sole owner of Sterling Capital Group, its subsidiaries and every single property it holds." She paused. "That includes the Hargrove Grand Restaurant. And the building it sits inside." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Maya picked up one of the documents and slid it to the nearest lawyer. "You'll want to read that." 48 hours ago she had been clearing plates for $6 an hour. Now she owned the plates. She owned the table. She owned the entire building those plates were cleared inside of. But nobody at that table knew what it had cost her to get there. Nobody knew about Leo. Nobody knew about Sarah. Nobody knew about the old man in the rain, or the envelope that had arrived on a Tuesday morning, or the decision she was about to have to make, the one that could burn everything she had just been given to the ground. But that part comes later. First, you need to understand who Maya was before all of this. Maya grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city with her mother and her younger sister, Amara. Her mother worked nights at a packaging warehouse. Maya worked everything else. By the time she was 19 she had 3 jobs. Cashier at a grocery store on weekday mornings. Delivery driver on weekends. And waitress, 5 nights a week, at the Hargrove Grand. The Hargrove Grand was not the kind of restaurant Maya would ever eat at. White tablecloths. Crystal glasses. A sommelier named Pierre who looked at her like she smelled of something low. The cheapest thing on the menu was $42, which was more than Maya made in a shift. But the tips were good when the guests were generous and Maya needed every cent. Her sister Amara had been sick for 2 years. A rare kidney condition that the doctors kept describing with long words Maya had to Google at 2 in the morning after her shifts. The short version was simple. Amara needed treatment that was not covered by their insurance. The treatment cost money. The money had to come from somewhere. And so Maya worked. She did not complain about it. She did not talk about it. She smiled at the customers, refilled their water glasses before they could ask, remembered how each regular liked their steak cooked, and tucked the tips into the envelope she kept folded in her apron pocket. Leo noticed her smile first. Leo Hartman was the restaurant manager. He was handsome in the way that men who know they are handsome tend to be. A little too aware of it, a little too practiced. He had dark hair that he kept swept back and he wore his button-down shirts with the cuffs rolled to show off his watch. He drove a car that cost more than Maya made in a year. She had never asked how he afforded it on a manager's salary. He started leaving notes on her locker. Small things. A compliment about her work. A smiley face. Then longer messages. Then a lunch invitation. Then dinner. Maya told herself to be careful. She had seen how Leo looked at other women, long sliding looks that he thought nobody noticed. But then he looked at her, really looked at her, and she let herself believe she was different. That was her first mistake. They dated for 7 months. It felt real to her. He remembered her sister's name. He asked about her mother. He told her she was the most genuine person he had ever met. And when she worked late and came home exhausted and her hands smelled like dishwater, he would hold them and tell her she was more than this place. That they were going to leave it behind together. She believed him. That was her second mistake. The night everything ended started like every other night. Maya arrived at 6 for the dinner shift. She tied her apron, checked her section, and went to pull clean towels from the kitchen. The walk-in freezer was at the back of the kitchen, past the prep counter, past the shelf of dry goods, past the narrow corridor where the staff kept their coats. He turned the corner. And she stopped. Leo was in the corridor. His back was to the wall, and his hands were on the waist of a woman in a red dress. His face was low, close to hers, and they were laughing softly at something. The kind of quiet laugh that belongs to people who are somewhere they think is private. The woman pulled back just slightly and Maya saw her face. Sarah Hargrove. The owner's daughter. 24 years old, Yale business degree, set to inherit the restaurant chain from her father within the year. She wore her blonde hair in a sleek knot and carried herself the way people do when they have never once had to wonder how rent would be paid. Maya had served her a dozen times. Sarah never looked at her when she ordered. Never said thank you when Maya refilled her glass. Never acknowledged her as a person at all. Maya stood there for 4 seconds. She knew because she counted them, her brain doing that strange emergency thing where time slows and becomes measurable. Then she turned around and walked back to her section without making a sound. She told herself she would deal with it later. She told herself to get through the shift. She almost made it. At 9:45, a man at table 7 reached for his jacket and then stood up slowly. He looked confused, patting his pockets. Then his face changed into something sharp and alarmed. He called over the floor manager, a woman named Patricia, and spoke to her in a low, urgent voice. Patricia's eyes moved to Maya. The man was missing his watch. A Patek Philippe he had set down on the edge of the table while he ate. Worth more than $40,000. Patricia came to Maya and asked her quietly if she had seen the watch. Maya said no. She had not. Patricia excused herself. She came back 2 minutes later with Leo. Leo looked at Maya with an expression she did not recognize at first. It took her a moment to understand that it was performance. Everything about his face was performed. The reluctance, the sadness, the forced professionalism. He said he needed her to come with him to the manager's office. He said there had been a complaint. Maya followed him into the office. She saw the security camera footage already pulled up on the monitor. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. The angle was from above, looking down at table 7. In the grainy image, you could see a figure in a white waitress uniform lean over the table to refill a water glass. You could see something small slip from the figure's apron pocket. It was blurry. It was far away. Could have been anything. Leo said it was the watch. Maya's mouth went dry. That is not what happened, she said. I did not take anything. Leo said he was sorry. He said his hands were tied. He said the evidence was right there. Maya looked at him. Really looked at him. And in that moment she understood everything. The note. The footage. The timing. This was not an accident. This was not a coincidence. Leo had seen her in that corridor. He had seen her see him. And this was his solution. Leo, she said very quietly. You know I didn't do this. He looked away. The office door opened. Sarah Hargrove walked in. She was still in the red dress. She looked at Maya the way you look at something unpleasant you have stepped in. Then she reached past Leo and picked up the phone on the desk. I'm calling security, Sarah said. And then I'm calling the police. Wait, Maya started. You are a thief. Sarah's voice was perfectly flat. Like the words bored her. And you are fired. Effective right now. Maya looked at Leo one final time. He was studying the floor. They walked her out through the dining room. Not the kitchen exit, not the back door. Through the dining room, past every table, past the guests who looked up from their expensive meals, past the other waitstaff who stood very still and did not meet her eyes. Sarah walked behind her, close enough that Maya could hear her heels on the tile. Just before the front door, Sarah stopped her. She reached over to a server station, picked up a carafe of cold coffee and poured it over Maya's head. The coffee ran down her face, her neck, soaked through her collar. It was cold. That shocked her more than anything. That specific temperature of something meant to be warm now turned cold and deliberate. The dining room went silent. Someone laughed quickly, then stopped. Get out, Sarah said. And don't come back. Maya walked out the door. The rain started the moment she hit the sidewalk. Of course it did. She stood on the pavement outside the Hargrove Grand with coffee dripping from her hair and rain soaking through her shirt, and she did not cry. She wanted to. The feeling was right there, pressing up hard against the back of her throat, but she pressed it back down because she was on a public street in front of a restaurant where people were still eating and she had some small dignity left and she was not going to lose it here. She started walking. She had $7 in her apron pocket. Not enough for a cab, barely enough for the bus. Her shift bag was still in the locker room. Her phone was inside it. She had no way to call anyone. The nearest bus stop was 6 blocks away. She had been walking for 2 blocks when she heard it. A sound. Low and strained. coming from the narrow space between two buildings, where a metal bench sat under an awning that barely kept the rain off. He almost kept walking. She was soaked and furious, and her whole life had just been burned to the ground, and she did not have room for anything else right now. She stopped walking. An old man was on the ground. He had been sitting on the bench and had slipped sideways, and now he was on one knee trying to push himself up, and his arms were shaking with the effort. He was maybe 75. Rain had soaked through his jacket. A good jacket, she noticed, wool, the kind tailors made. His face was tight with pain. He had fallen. And nobody on the street was stopping. People passed in both directions. Umbrellas bobbed. Eyes slid away. Two men in suits actually changed direction to avoid the narrow alley. Maya went in. She crouched down beside him and put her hand gently on his arm. "I've got you," she said. "Take it slow." It took 3 minutes to get him off the ground. His breathing was ragged. He had hit his palm when he fell, and it was bleeding through a small cut near his thumb. Maya looked at her $7. She looked at the small pharmacy across the street. She crossed in the rain, bought a bottle of water and a travel pack of bandages with 5 of her dollars, came back and sat on the wet bench beside him while she cleaned the cut on his hand and wrapped it. He watched her do it without speaking. When she was done, she looked up and found him studying her. Really studying her, the way people rarely do, taking in the coffee stain and the soaked uniform and the expression she was working very hard to keep neutral. "Bad night," he said. His voice was quiet and deliberate, each word placed carefully. Maya almost laughed. "You could say that." "Why did you stop?" he asked. Everyone else walked past. He thought about it. "Because you needed help," she said. "That's the only reason there is." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My name is Charles Sterling." She shook his hand. "Why say?" He asked if she could help him to the black car idling at the curb 20 feet away, the one she had not noticed until now, and she did. His driver got out quickly, alarmed, and helped Charles into the back seat. Charles rolled down the window as the car pulled away. "Thank you, Maya," he said. She watched the car until it disappeared into the rain. Then she counted her remaining $2, put them back in her pocket, and walked to the bus stop. She did not think about Charles Sterling again. She was too busy thinking about Amara's next medical payment, which was due in 11 days, and the fact that she no longer had a job. The next week was the worst of her life, and also somehow not. She filed for the 2 other jobs immediately. She called the restaurant's corporate HR line and disputed the theft accusation, knowing it would go nowhere but needing to do it anyway. She sat at the kitchen table at midnight with Amara asleep in the next room and wrote out every number she could think of, what they had, what they owed, how long they could last. The numbers did not add up. They never added up. Leo called her on day 3. She stared at his name on her screen for 4 full rings, and then she answered because she needed to hear what he would say. He said he was sorry. He said it got complicated. He said Sarah's father owned the restaurant and it was either Maya or his career, and he had made a choice, and he hoped she could understand that someday. Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Did you even care about me?" she asked. "At all." The pause before his answer was all she needed to hear. She hung up and blocked his number. She cried then, finally, alone in the kitchen with the lights off. But only for 10 minutes. She set a timer. 10 minutes was all she could afford. On day 7, an envelope arrived. It was delivered by courier, not by mail. Thick cream paper, her name written in formal type across the front. The return address was a law firm, Whitmore, Chin and Associates, on the 43rd floor of a building downtown that Maya had only ever seen from the street. She stood at the kitchen counter and opened it. She read it once. Then she sat down on the floor. Then she read it again. Then she called the number at the bottom of the letter. The offices of Whitmore, Chin and Associates looked exactly the way she expected. Marble floors. High ceilings. Assistants who wore the same expression Patricia from the restaurant had worn. Professional neutrality shading into quiet assessment of who you were and whether you belonged here. Maya wore her best clothes, which were not impressive, and walked in anyway. The senior partner, a woman named Helen Chin with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, met her in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. She slid a document across the table. Then she explained it. Charles Sterling had passed away 4 days after Maya helped him off the sidewalk. He had a heart condition he had been managing for years, and the fall had accelerated something that was already in motion. He died quietly in his home. He had also, in the final amendment to his will, signed and witnessed 3 days after the night in the rain, left the entirety of Sterling Capital Group to Maya Osei. Maya stared at Helen Chin. He didn't know me, she said. He knew enough, Helen said. He added a letter. It's in the package. She paused. Mr. Sterling was a wealthy man with no children and a very specific view of the world. He had been looking for someone worth leaving it to for some time. He said in the letter that you were the only person who had ever helped him for no reason at all. Maya did not know what to do with that. She was not sure she would know for a long time. What is Sterling Capital Group? She asked, because she had Googled the name but needed to hear it from a human being. Helen Chin set her hands flat on the table. It is a holding company. Real estate, hospitality, 3 private equity funds and various properties throughout the city. He paused again carefully. It is, among other things, the landlord for 17 commercial properties in this city. Maya waited. Including, Helen said, the building that houses the Hargrove Grand Restaurant. The room was very quiet. Maya looked out the window at the city spread below her, the same city she had been moving through her whole life from the bottom up. The restaurants where she cleared plates. The buses she rode at midnight. The pharmacies where she spent her last $2. She looked back at Helen Chin. What do I need to sign? It took 72 hours to complete the transfer of provisional control. Helen Chin and her team worked around the clock. Maya sat in the offices of Whitmore, Chin and Associates for most of those 3 days, reading every document they put in front of her, asking questions she did not always understand the answers to, and signing her name in ink that felt unreal on paper that felt impossible. She called Amara at the end of day 1. I need you to sit down, Maya said. I am sitting down, Amara said. I'm always sitting down, I'm sick. Maya almost laughed. Amara. I need you to listen to me, she told her. Quietly, carefully from the beginning, the old man, the rain, the envelope, the lawyers, all of it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Maya, Amara said at last, her voice strange and small. Are you serious? I'm sitting in a 43rd floor conference room right now, Maya said. Another silence. Then Amara said very softly, Did you eat today? And Maya started crying in the middle of the conference room while her lawyers politely looked at their papers and pretended not to notice. She wired money for Amara's next 6 months of treatment before she went to sleep that night. She slept 4 hours. It was the best 4 hours she had slept in 2 years. On the morning of the 3rd day, Helen Chin came into the conference room with a look on her face that Maya had not seen before. Something guarded. Something careful. There's something you need to know, Helen said. She sat down. She opened a file. Inside was a printout, financial records, recent, time-stamped. Maya looked at them and did not immediately understand what she was seeing. Helen explained. Sterling Capital Group had a significant loan coming due. A private creditor, a financial firm, had lent Charles Sterling $58 million 18 months ago, secured against 3 of Sterling's primary real estate holdings. The loan was due in full in 22 days. Charles was planning to refinance it, Helen said. He had arrangements in place. But when he passed, those arrangements fell apart, Maya said. Helen nodded. If the loan isn't paid or refinanced within 22 days, the creditor can move to seize those 3 properties. She paused. One of them is the building that houses the Hargrove Grand. Maya was quiet. The other 2, Helen continued, and something in her voice made Maya go still, are held as collateral for other parts of the business. If we lose them, there could be a cascade effect. We may lose more. How much more? Helen Chin set her hands on the table again. Potentially most of it. Maya looked at the number on the page. $58 million. She said the number in her head slowly, like she was learning a new language. Who is the creditor? She asked. Helen slid another page across. Maya looked at the company name. Hargrove Financial Holdings. She looked up. Sarah Hargrove's father, Helen said quietly. Richard Hargrove lent Charles Sterling this money. The 2 men were rivals for decades. Charles believed it was a gentleman's arrangement. But looking at the terms, Helen paused. The interest rate was punishing. The collateral was aggressive. Either Charles was not paying close enough attention or Richard Hargrove planned it from the start, Maya said. The room was silent. Maya stood and walked to the window. Down below, the city moved without knowing any of this. People walked to work. Cars waited at lights. Somewhere down there, in a restaurant on the 42nd block, Sarah Hargrove was probably drinking her morning coffee and planning what color to paint her future office. She did not know yet. She could not possibly know yet that Maya had walked into this building with nothing but a coffee-stained uniform and had signed her name onto a fortune. That in 22 days a clock was going to go off, and only one of them was going to be left standing. Maya pressed her hand flat against the cold glass of the window. $58 million. 22 days. And a rival who had been playing this game for 30 years before Maya ever arrived on the board. What are my options? She asked. Helen Chin opened the file again. I've identified 3 possible paths. The first is a refinance with a new lender. Possible, but given the short timeline and the terms of the original loan, it will be difficult. The second is a forced asset sale. Sell one of the smaller holdings quickly and use those funds to pay down the loan. You would keep most of the empire, but you would lose some leverage. And the third? Maya asked. Helen was quiet for a moment. The third is aggressive. You go to Hargrove directly. You tell him you know what this loan was. That it was not a business arrangement but a trap. You use what you know, about the loan, about the terms, about the timeline, as leverage to renegotiate. Maya turned from the window. Blackmail. Negotiation, Helen said carefully. With information. Maya said nothing. She was thinking about Amara. She was thinking about the letter Charles Sterling had left her. She had read it 3 times now, folded it carefully, kept it in her jacket pocket. He had written, I have watched people walk past fallen strangers my whole life. You were the only one who stopped. I don't know if this world deserves you, but I hope you use what I leave you well. She was thinking about what use well meant. She was thinking about Sarah pouring cold coffee over her head in front of 40 people. She was thinking about Leo looking at the floor. And she was thinking about something else. Something Helen Chin did not know yet. Something that Maya had found in the stack of corporate documents last night at 2 a.m, in a footnote in a 10-year-old partnership agreement that she had almost skipped past. A name. Leo Hartman. Leo was listed as a junior partner in Hargrove Financial Holdings. Not a manager at a restaurant. Not a man who couldn't afford his own car. A stakeholder. A participant. Someone who had been placed inside the Hargrove Grand not to manage staff but to watch for something. To watch, maybe, for exactly the kind of vulnerability that a woman working 3 jobs to pay her 6 sisters' medical bills represented. Had Leo been real? Had any of it been real? Had those 7 months been a performance from the beginning? Get close to the staff, keep an eye on the property, report back to Richard Hargrove about the state of Sterling's assets? Maya did not know. She was not sure she wanted to know. Not yet. What she knew was this. The game was bigger than she had understood. And she had walked into it wearing a coffee-stained uniform with $2 in her pocket. Maya, Helen said gently. I need a direction. The clock is running. Maya turned from the window and sat back down at the table. She pulled the stack of documents toward her. She looked at the name of the creditor. She looked at the 22-day timeline. She looked at her own signature on the transfer papers. Small and plain and nothing like the signature of a woman who owned a billion-dollar empire. But it was hers. All of it was hers. And nobody, not Sarah Hargrove with her red dress and her carafe of cold coffee, not Leo with his rolled-up cuffs and his practiced expressions, not Richard Hargrove with 30 years of calculated moves, nobody had given it to her, which meant nobody could take the fact of it away. She thought about Charles Sterling's letter one more time. Use what I leave you well. She looked up at Helen Chin. I want to see Richard Hargrove's full financial portfolio, she said. Everything. Every company, every subsidiary, every partner, every property. And I want it by morning. Helen sat forward. You've chosen option 3. I haven't chosen anything yet, Maya said. I'm gathering information first. She paused. I made assumptions before. About Leo. About what I was seeing. I'm not going to do that again. Helen nodded slowly. But there is something else, Maya said. She slid the 10-year-old partnership agreement across the table and pointed to Leo's name. I need to know everything about him. Who he works for, what he was doing at that restaurant, and whether any of it was ever actually about me at all. Helen looked at the document. She looked at Maya. That might take time, she said carefully. More than we have. Then start tonight, Maya said. She reached into her jacket pocket and touched the folded letter from Charles Sterling without taking it out. A reflex. Something grounding. Outside the 43rd floor window, the city was going dark. Lights were coming on in the towers one by one, floor by floor, like a slow ignition. Somewhere in one of those towers, Richard Hargrove was probably sitting in his own office, looking at the same city, waiting for the clock to run out on a dead man's estate. He did not know the estate had a new owner. He would know by morning. She went to the restaurant at 6 the next day. Not to work. Never again to work. She wore the black blazer she had borrowed from Helen Chen's assistant, who was roughly her size. She had her hair down. She did not have expensive heels or a designer bag or anything else that said power in the language that Sarah Hargrove spoke. What she had was the document in her hand. One single page printed on Whitmore, Chin and Associates letterhead, with the Sterling Capital Group seal at the top. She walked in through the front door. The hostess started forward, ready to ask if she had a reservation. Then she stopped. Something in Maya's face made her stop. Maya walked past the hostess stand, past the bar, past the tables where the dinner guests were just beginning to arrive. She could feel the room shifting as she passed through it. That subtle current of attention, people looking up from their water glasses. Sarah Hargrove was at the back of the room. She was sitting at the corner table, the owner's table, the reserved one with the fresh flowers, with Leo beside her. His arm was along the back of her chair. There was a bottle of champagne in the ice bucket beside the table. They were celebrating. Sarah looked up and saw Maya. Her expression moved from recognition to contempt so fast it was almost mechanical, like a reflex she had trained for years. "Security," she said, not loudly, the word falling out of her like it was nothing. She did not stand up. She did not even fully turn away from Leo. "Security, please remove this person." Leo looked up. His face went through 3 different expressions in 2 seconds. Maya watched all of them. She walked to their table. She set the document down on the white tablecloth, next to the champagne flutes, next to the fresh flowers, in the exact center of everything they had built on the wreckage of her. Sarah looked down at it, then up at Maya. "What is this?" "Read it," Maya said. A security guard appeared at Maya's elbow. She did not move. Sarah picked up the document. She began to read. Maya watched the moment when she understood. It moved across Sarah's face like weather, slow at first, then sudden, a complete change of sky. The room was very quiet. Sarah set the document down. She looked up at Maya. And for the first time in all the time Maya had known her, or served her, which was the same thing, Sarah Hargrove was not bored. "I'm not leaving," Maya said before Sarah could speak. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not shaking. She was surprised to find that they were not shaking. "But you are. I just bought this building." She paused. The pause was deliberate. And everything inside it. The champagne sat sweating in its bucket of ice. Leo had not said a single word. He was looking at the document on the table. Then he looked up at Maya and there was something in his face she had not expected. Something that was almost guilt. Almost like a person. "Maya," he started. "Don't," she said. Not angry. Just final. She picked up the document from the table. She turned and walked back through the dining room the way she had come. Past the tables, past the bar, past the hostess stand, and she felt the eyes of every person in the room following her and she did not look back. She pushed through the front door and stood on the sidewalk outside the Hargrove Grand. The same sidewalk. The same air. The same city that had watched her walk out of here soaked in cold coffee 7 days ago with nothing in her pocket. But nothing was the same. She reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone. Helen Chin answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," Maya said. "Richard Hargrove's office is expecting you tomorrow morning," Helen said. 9 o'clock. "Good." Maya looked up at the building. The Hargrove Grand. Its brass fixtures and its glowing windows and its velvet rope and everything it thought it was. "And Helen, did you find what I asked for?" "About Leo." A pause on the line. A short, careful one. "Yes," Helen said. "And Maya, you need to prepare yourself. It's more complicated than you thought." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "How much more complicated?" "Leo Hartman," Helen said slowly, "is not just a partner in Hargrove Financial. He has been working with Richard Hargrove for 5 years. But there is also a document, A recording, actually, that I think you need to hear before you walk into that meeting tomorrow. Maya stood on the sidewalk in the dark. Send it to me, she said. Maya. Helen's voice was careful. Almost gentle. When you hear this, you are going to have a decision to make. A real one. And I want you to know, whatever you decide, this firm will support you. But you need to go into tomorrow knowing the full truth. Maya looked back at the restaurant one last time. Through the glass front, she could see Sarah still sitting at the corner table. Her hands were flat on the white tablecloth. He was very still. Leo was gone. Send it, Maya said again. She walked to the curb and waited for the car Helen had arranged. A real car, a car she had not had to call for herself, the first of what would apparently be many new realities she had not yet learned to navigate. The night air was cool. Down the block, a bus groaned past on its route. She thought about 22 days. She thought about $58 million. She thought about Richard Hargrove and his 30 years of calculated moves and his careless bet that a girl who cleared plates could be swept aside without consequence. She thought about Charles Sterling's letter, folded in her pocket. The car pulled up. She got in. Her phone buzzed. Helen's message. One audio file attached. No additional text. Maya stared at the file icon on her screen as the car moved through the dark streets. The city slid past the windows. She put her earphones in. Her thumb hovered over the play button. Whatever was in that recording would change what happened tomorrow. Might change everything. It might give her the weapon she needed to walk into Richard Hargrove's office and end this in a single meeting. Or it might be something else entirely, something that didn't feel like a weapon at all. Something that would make the choice in front of her much harder than she was ready for. She pressed play. And the voice that came through her earphones was not Richard Hargrove's. It was her mother's.